They look at these players like a joke. To be fair, why shouldn't they? Players are demanding 30% of league revenue prior expenses being paid. The players that have never driven in viewership, the players that have never brought in attendance, the players that have in the making. Since the Players Union decided to put out a hype tape, a hype video of them saying, "We deserve more. We're opting out." As the deadline passed on January 9th, the sides ushered in a period called status quo, where the conditions of the 2020 deal remain in effect. In the 3 weeks since, the stalemate has continued. The Women's National Basketball Players Association is still awaiting an official response from the league since sending it a...
That laugh says everything about where WNBA negotiations really stand right now. While fans celebrate Caitlin Clark's highlights and record-breaking ratings, behind closed doors, the 2026 season is quietly slipping from unlikely to nearly impossible. The Players Union submitted a CBA proposal, and the league's response has been complete silence. No counteroffer, no meetings, nothing. The demand for a large share of gross revenue in a league that has struggled financially for decades is being viewed by owners not as a serious proposal, but as unrealistic. And while the public celebrates surface-level wins, the real story is unfolding out of sight. All of this shows we're on the right track, because the situation is far more serious than most people realize. The league is racing toward the next season, but major pieces still have to fall into place. Expansion teams need to be finalized, hundreds of free agents need contracts, and an entire draft class has to be assigned to rosters. None of that can happen without a collective bargaining agreement. The clock is ticking. One side refuses to move, and the other won't even respond. What makes it even more frustrating is that the players walked away from the previous deal long ago, and now the league is stuck in limbo with everything on pause. It's been more than a year since the players made a big, dramatic show of opting out of their deal, promising change and a new era. Yet the deadline passed, and the league simply rolled into a status quo, meaning the old agreement they criticized is still running. For all that time, there's been little real progress, and the latest proposal from the players didn't even get a response from the league. Reading between the lines, this feels very different from past negotiations that were framed as collaborative and united. Back then, both sides smiled for the cameras and talked about partnership. This time, the tone is colder, quieter, and far more fractured. Back in 2020, the mood was all about collaboration, partnership, and mutual respect. Fast forward to now, and that unity is gone. Players are openly calling out league leadership. Frustration that once stayed behind closed doors is spilling into public view, and trust in good faith negotiations has clearly eroded. The tone shifted after the surge in attention driven by a once-in-a-generation star, and a couple of strong seasons at the gate and on TV created a sense of new leverage. Suddenly, expectations jumped to NBA-style revenue splits and perks, even though the league's business reality hasn't caught up to those demands. Here's the uncomfortable truth people keep avoiding. The WNBA hasn't been losing money for a few years. It's been operating at a loss for decades. Most businesses don't survive that long. They shut down. The only reason the league is still here is because the NBA has continuously stepped in to cover the losses. And now, players are demanding a large share of gross revenue, not profit after expenses, but money taken off the top before the league even pays for travel, staff, facilities, and marketing. That's the reality gap at the center of this standoff. In a league that loses money year after year, there's nothing left to split once basic operations are paid for. The league's counteroffer of a large share of net revenue sounds generous on paper, but when net revenue is close to zero or negative, it doesn't actually mean much. You can't divide a pie that doesn't exist. Stripping away the noise, the real debate comes down to economic reality, with issues like guaranteed full-season housing for every player becoming major sticking points in negotiations. Across major pro leagues, season-long housing isn't standard, and even women's soccer is moving away from team-provided housing as players are expected to manage living costs with professional salaries. Yet WNBA players are pushing for guaranteed housing for everyone, regardless of income. The league reportedly offered a middle ground, support for lower-paid players and those in high-cost markets, while higher earners cover their own housing. On paper, that sounds like a reasonable compromise, but the players rejected it, widening the gap and hardening positions on both sides. The players are pushing for universal housing, which brings the conversation back to the core issue. Owners have put more money, benefits, and concessions on the table, yet the response keeps circling back to a hard line on taking a large share of gross revenue, with little room for compromise. At one point, a player even had to publicly explain that negotiations require give and take, which says a lot about how rigid the standoff has become. What's most revealing is that when the audience was small, it was easier to sell a feel-good story. Now that attention is growing, the gap between public messaging and behind-the-scenes reality is getting harder to hide. For years, it was easy to spin the narrative and dress up heavy losses as investment and growth. But now, more people are paying attention, not just die-hard fans or paid commentators, but everyday viewers asking basic questions. Why is the NBA still subsidizing this? Why demand a large cut of revenue when the league hasn't turned a profit? Why not try standing on your own and see what happens? Those are fair questions, and the quiet from league leadership suggests they're wrestling with the same doubts. That's why this standoff feels so strange. The players keep resubmitting nearly the same proposal with minor tweaks, expecting a different outcome. Owners keep saying no or not responding at all, while neither side is willing to budge because both believe they have leverage. Players feel empowered by recent gains, stronger ratings, better attendance, sold-out arenas, bigger TV stages, and a surge of mainstream attention driven by a breakout star. For the first time, casual fans can name more than a couple of players, and that momentum feels like real power. To them, it finally feels like the moment to demand what they believe they're owed. Owners see leverage through economics and long-term sustainability. Decades of financial reality show the league survives not because it's profitable or self-sustaining, but because it's supported as part of a larger basketball ecosystem. That subsidy is the safety net, and the moment it's no longer seen as worth maintaining, the entire structure becomes vulnerable. That's the quiet leverage on the owner's side, and it shapes how hard they're willing to hold their line.
The compromising? Does that player understand that it's the players who aren't doing the compromising? Every proposal we see, every offer we see from the owners seems to be more and more compromising. They seem to just give more and more money, and it's the players that say, no, but this 30%, we want this. We're not compromising, we want this. Interesting. Assessing a path forward. Come to a mutual understanding on revenue sharing. A big part of the reason this stalemate is that the sides still do not see eye to eye value and is not too much. As Nafisa Collier told ESPN this month. We just got done saying that they lost money 3 decades in a row, and Nafisa Collier is saying that represents their value. I'm telling you folks, the arrival of Caitlin Clark has emboldened these ladies something fierce. The battery is in their back because they've had 2 years of respectable metrics. Viewership and attendance. Find a middle ground on housing.
When you connect the dots, it becomes clear why the league can afford to ignore proposals for weeks without feeling pressure. In the end, players need the league more than the league needs any single player. Even a transformative superstar doesn't rewrite decades of economic reality. One breakout name can shift attention and momentum, but it doesn't erase years of losses, and the owners know this story well. Owners have seen brief spikes in attention before, followed by a return to normal, so they're not going to overhaul the entire economic model based on a couple of strong years of star-driven growth. One quote sums up the divide. Players argue that a large cut of gross revenue reflects their value, but value in business isn't defined by what you feel you deserve, it's defined by what the league actually brings in. If a league brings in less money than it costs to operate, the value created is negative. That's not opinion, that's basic math, and the owners know the numbers inside out. The recent surge of mainstream attention has clearly emboldened players, not as a criticism, but as a reality check. After tasting broader relevance and seeing major sports shows lead with WNBA highlights, expectations shifted fast. That new visibility changed how players see their leverage, even if the underlying economics haven't caught up yet. Players have seen packed arenas with fans who actually know the roster, and after years of being treated like a side project, they want equal footing with the biggest leagues. That desire is understandable, but equal treatment depends on equal economics, and that's where the disconnect sits. Players are asking to be treated like a major professional league right now, while owners are saying the business has to reach that level first before the perks and structures can follow. Right now, the numbers don't justify the scale of the demands. Recent attendance bumps were driven by a once-in-a-generation star, not by broad, system-wide growth across the league. Even the media rights momentum exists largely because those deals are bundled through the NBA's broader package. That gap between momentum and underlying business fundamentals is at the heart of the current standoff. Viewership is up compared to the league's own past, but it's still small next to other major sports. That leaves two paths forward: bring back a realistic proposal grounded in economic reality, or risk a work stoppage. And if games are delayed or canceled, the players stand to lose the most. The momentum and mainstream attention they finally built disappears the moment play stops. Casual fans don't follow labor disputes or revenue split debates. They just move on to whatever sport is actually on. If play stops, the casual fans who just arrived won't be waiting around, and when the league returns, many of them will be gone. The window of mainstream relevance is small, and recent momentum is tied to a short burst of star-driven attention that won't last forever. Wasting a season risks snapping that momentum entirely, yet both sides are acting like they can afford the delay. That leaves one uncomfortable question. Who's right? The players pushing to be paid like a top-tier league, or the owners refusing to sign off on revenue splits that don't add up? You can't claim both at the same time. This standoff comes down to reality versus aspiration. Players argue they deserve NBA-level treatment, while owners point out the league doesn't yet have NBA-level economics. Players say the league is finally relevant. Owners counter that 2 strong years don't erase decades of losses. Both sides have points, but only one side ultimately decides whether the league keeps operating. These negotiations will determine whether the WNBA builds on its recent momentum or wastes the biggest opportunity it's ever had. With the season fast approaching and no agreement in place, both sides are dug in, waiting for the other to blink. If you want to see what happens when big aspirations collide with economic reality, stay tuned here. We're tracking every development in this standoff, and when someone finally compromises, you'll hear it first. We'll also break down what a potential work stoppage could really mean for the league's long-term future. The next video dives deeper, so drop your thoughts below. Are the players right to push for more after finally breaking into the mainstream, or are the owners right to reject demands that don't match financial reality? Either way, the outcome will reshape the league's future. We're either heading toward unprecedented player pay in a league that's never turned a profit, or watching hard-won momentum fade because neither side would bend. The next stretch will decide everything. Stay tuned.